Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Worcester City's Council scheduled for this December 17, 2018. Is after 7:30 p.m. The next meeting will be Monday, January 7th, 2019. Ms. DiPaolo, would you please call the roll?
Sanders.
Here.
Silvestri.
Here.
Warden.
Here.
Ansel.
Here.
Cavan. Bastancik.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
We do have a quorum. Mr. Cavan did call and he had a family death, and I told him, he said he didn't think he'd be here, and I told him in no uncertain terms not to even think about coming. So the agenda will remain as presented, and at this time I would ask you to stand and join City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now seek approval of the December 3rd, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Silvestri.
Second.
Is there a second? Second, Mr. Myers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The minutes of December 3rd, 2018 are approved. Mr. Mayor, welcome. Your last chance before council.
In 2018,
Yeah.
that's right. So thank you, Mr. Beitendijk, and welcome council members. It is a great ending to another great year for our city. So we're thrilled to be with you tonight and talking important things for our city. The budget is one of the key things that you do as council members, and so I know many people have been reviewing it and asking good questions, and hopefully you've gotten the appropriate responses out of our team on all of those. So we are here to help in any way we can tonight in answering any final questions. This is a process that has taken place every year since we became a charter city, and probably prior to that as statutory city. But I do know that we have had over 30 years of excellence in financial reporting as declared. Is it a state agency that does that, Andre, or is that the
and Canada.
U.S. and Canada? So I think we've got a pretty good track record with the way that our finance reporting and our record keeping is done in our city. So. Also, you have one piece of legislation that's, again, another on third reading tonight, and that is the ordinance concerning the homeless and the vagrancy in our city. Many of you were at a meeting in this room with members of our downtown and heard the angst and the frustration with merchants and people who live in the downtown with the vagrancy problem. That is the reason that this legislation was put together. It was derived by our legal team here in the city. It actually had been something that had been in the works for this whole year because we knew there were things happening in the community that were going to come to a head at some point in time. So the whole purpose of the legislation is to help address the issue, but it's to get people who are sleeping on the streets in sub-zero weather to find a place in a bed in a warm shelter. And that is the purpose behind this. And in doing so, we hope to get them the help that they might need to get back into a more normal life and live someplace off of the streets and in some type of a facility or anything of their choosing, but it's a much better way for the whole community to move forward. So that is what's in front of you this evening, and it is yours to decide if we move forward or not. But I do know that this is probably the best piece of legislation that our legal counsel could recommend to try to address this problem. So With that, we are here to help tonight, and we wish you a great Christmas and New Year's and holiday season here after our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have no petitions tonight. We have a number of members who are citizens who've asked to speak tonight. I'll remind those that in order to speak, it has to be an agenda item, and you either have to be a resident of Worcester or have a business here in the city of Worcester. So when you come up and speak, and we'll ask you to come to the microphone there at the little podium. Hopefully it's on. If not, Mr. Scavelli's usually turns it on for us. So I would ask you to state your name and your Worcester city address. So Mr. Atkins spoke, or is written first name to speak.
Yeah, it's on.
Thanks, Mr. Scavelli.
Oh, no. My name's Roger Adkins. I live at 401 Maiden Lane, Worcester, Ohio. A lot of people don't know who I am. I was the one that started the Chickahominy Indian Tribal Rescue Mission over 10 years ago to help the poor and the homeless people here in Wayne County when nobody else in this county would help them. Every year, federal money would come in to Wayne County. None of that money ever went to them. It was always used for something else. So when I started the mission down there, it was on federal land. I'm an American Indian. I used my American heritage and my rights under those things to start a tribal rescue mission down there. I started with the problem, trying to solve the problem of homelessness that we have here in the city. I had the city probationary officers bring people that couldn't go into the Salvation Army down to me because that was the only place that they could go. I had the state Ohio parole officer out of Akron bring people down here and ask me, can they stay with me? Because there was no place for them to go. But yet, city council, county of Wayne County, commissioners and all of them couldn't wait to illegally evict me from that piece of property. Now, I have the solutions. I'm not like some that will go out there and tell you that they have questions and have no answers. I have the answers to the problem. And that problem that we have today is hand-me-down dinosaur corruption using the money that comes into this county for the specific purpose of rapid rehousing, going to every place other than where it's supposed to go. Now, you want to take and make a law for a person that's homeless. Let's look at the wide range of that law. If you make a person that is homeless or does not have no money against the law and put a criminal tag on top of it, you just took any chance of them ever getting a job. Now you made it permanent that they're in there. Then, not only that, but if they do not accept where they want to send you, then you're going to take and go to jail. Well, where do they want to send you? Their track record is not Wayne County. Their track record is send you to Cleveland, send you to Akron, Canton. Oh, how about load all the white people up down here that's homeless and send them to Harlem in the middle of the night to see how many make it back out alive. Well, none of them made it out alive. The contingency of this hand-me-down dinosaur corrupt system is good. How many more can we send there? Because they ain't going to be coming back. And that's the problem. How do we stop that problem. I've already started to take away hometown rule. I've already started to take away blanket immunities.
Mr. Atkins, I've given you a lot of leeway.
I understand that. And I'm going to hold this, that I am against this passing of this bill. Because of these things here, there is other ways of actually taking care of the problem than trying to make somebody that is poor, homeless, and don't have anything a criminal.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your extra time.
Jay Clemmy? Again, state your name, address, and what you wish to address.
I'm Jay Clemmy. I'm 1633 Wildwood. Want to speak with regard to the, well, potentially criminalizing hunger and poverty. I came to this community in 1994 to join Wooster Clinic, which has subsequently become Cleveland Clinic Wooster, and I've been away in faculty role for a few years, but now retired, except I'm volunteering at Startsman regularly, which is not unrelated to this topic either. But sitting here 2 weeks ago, I connected dots together in my life that I have known for decades but hadn't put together, which is that my dad, who'd be 111 right now, in the year, either side of his 30th birthday, for something over a year was homeless. And I'd never really processed that if you're eating the food that people leave on their lunch trays and you're sleeping in a clothing store as security, and you're an Iowa farm boy, so you know how to handle weaponry, but only I think it haunted him his whole life that he had the gun out once because he heard people in that store. But within a decade of that, he was back in that community and served in a professional role as pharmacist for over 30 years, well into his 70s. So I'm asking you to consider, each of you think about your parents, grandparents, and family members through the Depression years and wonder what opportunities there were where, for my dad, there were people in that community that wanted him to succeed and helped him through. I don't see that we have those resources now, and I don't see that we're targeting fixing the problem by way of helping the lives of the people we're looking at. So you can criminalize and give people a police record. This was talked about 2 weeks ago. And I look at, there are arguments about how to spend money, but we need to put our resources, but really put our thinking and our morality and our sense of commitment as human beings into looking at this issue and working at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kiefer, I caught you, sorry. If you like us so much, move to Wooster. All right? Kevin Franklin? No preaching now.
Gotcha. Little bit. My name's Kevin Franklin. I'm the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ at 150 East North Street. And I want to thank those of you who showed up tonight for the same reason that I'm here, about issue 2018-025 and our concern for people who are less fortunate and the effects that the legislation may have on their lifestyle, particularly creating a criminal record and giving them fines that they will not be able to pay. There's an old adage in the Old Testament that says, work for the good of the people you live with. And faith communities have always been a place where people come to socialize and to be socialized. And we learn civility, and we find ways that we can be involved in the common good. And most of our congregations began as immigrant congregations, and that was the place where people began to integrate into the larger society. Our society is broken down somewhat, and our downtown churches continue to work together to bring civility to public places and to address issues that have to do with justice. And this is the practice of our faith, doing justice. We teach our children everyone is a child of God, and they deserve to be treated that way. And if we teach our children these words, we also have to demonstrate with our actions what these words mean. So the definition used to define homelessness by our public schools is a lack of a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. I've served on the Wayne Housing Coalition for a number of years. We have a point-in-time count in January, and the homeless count indicated that Worcester Public Schools reported 199 children who met that definition in 2018. Now, that number has significantly increased every year. On the first of the month, I take a sobering drive around Worcester, and I see families experiencing the trauma of losing all their worldly possessions on the tree lawn. Very often they call our churches and they're scrambling for a place to stay that night or a place to go. And a significant section of our population has been reduced to a subsistence level, leaving more and more people struggling on the street for shelter. 1/4 of all of Ohio's renters now spend over half of their income on their rent. Faith communities will continue to keep the conversation about safe, affordable shelter alive. And our hope is that we might establish an affordable housing task force to explore solutions that will serve the housing needs of all citizens. And my hope is that the proposed punitive legislation be tabled or voted down, and to encourage the city to follow through on their intentions for these people who've been subjected to the elements by showing support for, in whatever way we reach it, a low-restriction shelter, and to look seriously at solutions to the problem of insufficient affordable housing for Worcester's low-wage earning citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joel Chupp?
Good evening. Joel Chupp, 157 Park Avenue, Worcester, Ohio. I'd like to share my thoughts also on the resolution 2018-025, coming up for third reading this evening. First, I want to say that I appreciate the efforts put forth by city administration in putting this proposed ordinance before council. I believe the spirit of the legislation was an attempt to provide a solution for the homeless living on the streets in our downtown area, as well as address the complaints and frustrations of our area merchants. As a registered nurse and a case manager who deals daily with the effects of poverty, illness, and addiction, I fully understand the complexity of this issue. I'm also here this evening to say that I believe this ordinance will not work for our city for a lot of reasons, many of which you've already heard and probably will hear some more again tonight. Our experience several years ago with Tent City, located along the Madison Avenue overpass, demonstrates that while we may have eliminated an eyesore and an embarrassment to the city, we did nothing to address the real problem of homelessness in Worcester. Likewise, I believe the proposed ordinance will do nothing to address the needs of homeless in Worcester and will only attract litigation and the unwanted attention of the media and the ACLU. At the last council meeting, I believe it was Mr. Ansel who stated platitudes are nice, but solutions are what is needed. After conversations with the director and the associate director of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Wayne and Holmes County, it is my understanding that a task force, including Assistant Chief of Police Scott Rotolo, has already been established by the Wayne County Housing Coalition. This task force has spent time studying the issues with downtown homelessness and working to develop a degree of trust amongst the marginalized and those affected by homelessness in our community. I would suggest this evening that we develop a closer collaboration and a regular reporting between this group of professionals and the city, and that this would be helpful in coming up with some long-term solutions that will not only satisfy our merchants, but provide some viable proposals for addressing the needs of these citizens. Lastly, as Reverend Franklin pointed out, I think the elephant in this room, and one that we all know, is that there is simply not enough low-income housing available in our community. And until you, as elected officials, make a priority of addressing this critical need, our problem of homelessness will only continue to grow. As many cities can attest to, and what evidence-based research proves, housing first, along with associated wraparound services, is absolutely foundational to any attempt to address this growing need. This issue that we have before us tonight provides us with an opportune time to effectively address homelessness in our community. And I would encourage you to join with the mental health community to explore funding operations to both continue the evaluations of the issues at hand and uncover viable and evidence-based solutions for the betterment of this marginalized group of people in our fine city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna Bell?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. This is my first time, so I thank you for having me here today. I speak from experience.
Would you state your name and
I'm
your
sorry.
Worcester City
My
address?
name is Donna Bell. I live in Wooster, Ohio, and I don't care to give the address for certain reasons being.
But you attest you live within the
I live
municipality?
in Wooster City,
Okay.
yes. When I first came to Wooster 5 years ago, I was a retired mother of 5 children, and I have lived in other counties where I have had health issues. So I am on SSI. I've always had housing. I've always had low-income housing that I've lived in, and it was very difficult to live in some of those neighborhoods because it was culture shock for me. We all weren't raised the same way. For someone that was a regular church attendee, didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't make me any better than anyone else. But I was exposed to different cultures, different people, and there's good in everyone. I found that there are contentious characters out there, and whether they're housed or whether they're not housed, they're everywhere. They're in your neighborhood, they're in my neighborhood. I ended up coming here to Wooster because I wanted to go more country. I wanted to live farther from the big cities that I was living in. Well, the housing was an issue right off the bat because there was no housing available. I was told there was a 2-3-year window waiting list. So I went back to my pastor. He suggested Salvation Army. From the moment you arrive at Salvation Army, your information's gleaned. They assess whether or not you're from the outside of the county, or you belong here, you've lived here, you're resident more than 30 days. I was not. So there was only a 2-week window that I was allowed to stay there. Now, arriving here in this county with a 12-year-old rabbit in my back seat, my best friend at that time, trying to relocate and have housing, I didn't find housing fast enough, lost the housing because I had a voucher for only 30 days. Could not come up with the deposit, could not come up with the proper credentials that I needed so that I could get my housing. Needless to say, I ended up down, and thank you, Jesus, I ended up down at Tent City. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I said, I don't want to go with the killers and the robbers and the jargon that I heard about people that were down there. But I was finding myself at the sheriff's department sitting with another young gentleman that I had found that was homeless. And I was almost wanting to go in there and have housing there. I was asking them, what do I do? I was homeless. And I says, this is not good for a mother of 5 children that are grown and raised, and my mother's on disability. I didn't want to be a burden to her. My family's lower income. So it necessitated that I go down to Tent City, and I stayed down there. And you know what? Roger had rules: no drinking, no drugs, and no drama. I said, well, drinking is fine. I don't drink. I've never drank, and I've never smoked. And I said, but the drama, I can't promise you. I've got 5 children. He said, you're in. But it was an experience for somebody that's never camped, never been in a tent. And I grew up down there. I was there for a long time. I met several people that were dying of cancer. I met several people that had the same situations that I did, that you couldn't get the housing. I was told that there was a 2-3 year waiting list, and that could be longer if you didn't call in and check regularly with the Metro people, the housing people. The conundrum was, yes, we had our different people down there, and yes, there was some lawlessness, but you know what? We had a lot of oversight. We had a lot of drones. We had a lot of people pegging us where we were. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to being degraded. Degradation was terrible. I had my vehicle destroyed. I had rocks put through my windows. And I went to the police station, and within 5 minutes of me reporting my car damaged, my $5,000 car totaled, I had police officers putting a tag on my window, an orange tag, and throwing a piece of paper at me that fell to the ground and said, "Bring it back when you can." I was devastated. And it continued from there, that I didn't have a lot of rights. I was now labeled as not only an outsider, but someone that was poor, disabled, homeless, a tent city girl. I started to come up and ask people questions. Why all of a sudden are people mistreated this way? More crime came. Because when I came up from Tent City, because I had no choice.
Ms. Bell, I don't mean to interrupt you. You've spoken 4 minutes,
Okay, let me
and
tell-
I've
let me
given
tell
you a
you what the
lot of
bottom line
latitude
is.
as well.
Thank you, sir. The bottom line is, everyone has a story that's out there in the street. You're one paycheck away from a sickness or a job loss. It could happen to anyone. Those are someone's children out there. They might not be yours. They might not be mine. I've hugged people that were in rehab or that were tough loved out of their home. They're in the woods, they're crying, they're cold, they're tired. They don't want to be criminal-sized, because those people have housing. They have social workers. They have people to advocate for them. They have the courts to advocate for them. They get housing. Do you know who's out there? Some of the passive and meek people, but sometimes they have mental issues, and they have attitudes, some of them, because now they don't think you care about them. They don't think anybody cares about them. Okay, some of them are wanting to just self-medicate and die. This is terrible. Now, I know in Medina they have Operation Homes. They've done something about that. They've built a lot of homes for elderly people. I've taken an 84-year-old man out of this county 2 weeks ago because there was no help for him here. If they wanted to open a case on him.
Ms. Bell, I
Okay, what I'm saying
implore you
is,
to finish
have some
up.
compassion for the people that are more misfortunate, and please don't penalize them. They're adults, they're not children, and they don't need any more of the drones and the being admonished and the penal system. You're criminalizing people that have an opportunity to be taxpayers or to be voters for you, and please don't do that to them anymore. That's what I'm asking you. Thank you.
Mark Gooch?
Mark Gooch, 1636 Gashi Street. Members of council, I appreciate your time tonight. At the last meeting, it was noted inspirational words don't get things done, and I agree. When we go to church, we receive an inspirational message, and that by itself is not intended to get things done. It's intended to inspire us to action. There also was a comment to the effect, no one just gives money to provide a free service, which I would disagree with. Anytime we give money to an organization such as United Way, the donor isn't expecting something in return. They're expecting it will be used to the benefit of those who need the services it will provide, because we as a community believe in helping one another. While I'm hopeful from the comments at the last meeting, the legislation 2018-025 will fail tonight, I do want to encourage us to go farther. I recognize my mention of turning Horns Nursing Home into a shelter is maybe overly ambitious. However, in Ms. Mosier's follow-up story on the budget, I noted among the different areas being allocated funds was a category designated as health and social services with about $133,000. It does appear that increased policing downtown is having a positive effect in regard to the issues raised by the merchants, and that's good. Thank you, Chief Fisher. However, are we treating the symptom rather than the problem? Also mentioned in the budget review at the last meeting was the fact that there will be a carryover of, I believe, a couple of $1 million, $1 or $2 million, from this year to next year. Given the impact of incidents noted on merchants in the downtown and the related concern, it would sound as though part of these issues relate to economic development issues. While I recognize the city may already be working with various social service agencies, would it be worthwhile for the city to consider allocating an additional several $100,000 towards those agencies that might be able to provide additional support or assistance to the homeless that we've noted downtown and elsewhere in the community? I recognize there will always be some individuals who just refuse assistance. However, it seems as though we have been talking about this issue for a number of years, and it continues. Lastly, I wonder if there has been any research into programs or approaches that other rural communities have implemented that have been effective. We did just hear mention of a program up in Medina. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Greg Garris?
My name is Greg Garris, and I reside at 347 North Grant Street. I'm opposed to this ordinance tonight, the ordinance that the mayor, in my opinion, in less than a sensitively manner, stated was a vagrancy problem. I'm opposed to this ordinance because City Council was established for each elected ward member and council at large members to represent all the people of those wards and citywide. Not just a few rich or those in businesses. Taxes are taken from those wards they're representing and are given away in tax abatements, gazebo projects, money which could be spent building homeless shelters. There are poor people in those wards with needs, wants, ambitions, and federal rights, as well as rich people. A council member should not discriminate between the rich and poor, as maybe you are doing this evening. And if you vote on this to make homelessness a crime, you have failed your purpose. I'm opposed to this because Sanders, who introduced this bill, this ordinance, and all others, in my opinion, who hatefully and hideously wrote and co-sponsored this, when this finally got out on our TV waves and in our local newspaper, made every homeless person suffer emotional distress and cause pain and suffering. This ordinance smacks of retaliation and, in my opinion, conspiracy, breaking federal RICO laws, federal hate crime statutes, the Federal Enabling Act. I'm opposed to this ordinance. It must be withdrawn, quashed, not tabled for future consideration. And those from the Director of Law and likely Main Street, Mr. Sanders, who pushed this, may have to defend themselves in federal court, even if this does not pass, for violating these civil rights statutes. I'm opposed to this because it also made, in my opinion, Main Street a hateful mouthpiece for the city. Main Street receiving bed tax money, in my opinion, making her the biggest welfare recipient in the town. Anyone at any time could become homeless, especially if one is sued in federal court. Some of the largest recipients, as I mentioned, Main Street. Where is her compassion? Where is the city's compassion for following her in her footsteps, supporting her with the bed tax money? Secondly, I signed up for a second ordinance, and that is the first one on the agenda, appropriating from various funds to individual accounts for the fiscal year ending December 2019. I'm opposed to this ordinance because we don't have a clue what's in the budget. We don't know if that rapid rehousing money, which has been commingled illegally, shoved in a general fund, is not going to feed current city and retired employees with the annual spaghetti meal. Mr. Director of Law, or of Administration, you can hide your face in shame, but where is that money going if it's not to housing? It seems like it's going to feed your bellies with your summer picnics and your spaghetti meals. Think about the next meal you're getting from the city provided to you as a city employee, currently working or retired, if that money didn't come from rapid rehousing money. Next time you enjoy a meal, where is this being paid for? Thank you.
And Alexander Thompson. Don't make me gavel you down.
Don't worry, Mr. Breitendijk. Good evening, Mr. President, members of council, Mr. Mayor. I stand before you to
Would
oppose...
you state your address?
That's right. Yes. As your neighbor, 327 Bloomington Avenue, Wooster, Ohio. Yes, excuse me. I stand before you tonight to oppose the ordinance 2018-025, because in my opinion, I believe it is the criminalization of poverty. The homeless are among the weakest in our society, and many of them face mental health issues, drug addiction issues, financial precarity, and of course this time of year, the cold. And I'm disheartened to find that our council would choose on their last meeting before Christmas to add to those burdens the fear of punishment. And I understand that the goals of this legislation come from a good place, come from wanting to help those weak people in society, but I believe the method is inherently misguided. And I also understand that in this legislation, the police would offer them a ride to the shelter and that they want to get them into the shelter, and I think that's a very good thing. But at the end of the day, there are always going to be people that are going to refuse that for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't like it, or maybe they disagree with what the Salvation Army stands for, and that is their right. How you live and how you look don't change the rights that you have. And these folks should be treated like the adults that they are. In addition, I think that the criminalization of homelessness will make it harder for these people to make the full recovery that is essentially the goal of this legislation. Giving them a mark on their record and having them spend a night in prison won't help them find a job, won't help them get back up on their feet. Instead, it will make those things harder. Now, clearly, the city has a problem with vagrancy and homelessness, and I agree that we need to solve that. And I join other speakers tonight in advocating for low-income housing and allotting more money to organizations that help ameliorate this problem with compassion. But I don't think that hiding a problem in a prison cell will make it any better. And many have argued that vagrancy doesn't look good for the city, and that may be true. But I also don't think it looks good for the city for council to approve this measure that would impose draconian measures on the weakest among us. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the communications from the public. Committee reports. There was a finance committee. If you want to give us a brief.
Yes, I'll be
synopsis,
brief.
I'd
We had
appreciate it.
a 30-minute work session this evening on our ongoing review of the 2019 appropriation budget. There had been some questions and some financial calculation issues that were discussed and resolved. I thank council for their participation and the administration for their timely responses to the follow-up questions. And I think we're ready now tonight on the third reading of the 2019 budget to make a vote on it and get this thing going for the upcoming year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ansel. No public hearings, but I do recognize a number of scouts out in the audience. Usually that means that it's like the Citizenship Award is what they're here for. Yeah, good. Well, welcome all. Which troop? Or
61.
okay, any other troops?
They're all from Troop 61.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome Troop 61. And You've picked one that there's a lot of controversy, but fortunately for you, so you won't be out past your bedtime, a short agenda here. That brings us to unfinished business. This is the third reading of ordinance number 2018-023. No suspension of the rules are necessary. And before I turn it over to Mr. Ansel, I would ask our clerk of council, Ms. DiPaolo, to read the title.
Ordinance number 2018-023, an ordinance appropriating from various funds to individual accounts for the current expenses and other expenditures for the city of Worcester for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we've had 6 weeks to review the 2019 operating budget. A lot of discussion, committee meetings, follow-up issues and definition on behalf of council by the city's administration. I think we're ready to call for a vote tonight, Mr. President.
Well, seeing it's on third reading, I think you ought to move.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Any other further comment, questions? I know the administration has addressed a number of questions and issues, but here's one last opportunity. We've had 2 committee meetings. Seeing none, I would ask Ms. DiPaolo to call the roll on the motion to adopt.
Myers?
No.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
And Bostancic.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 2018-023 passes. This brings us to ordinance number 2018-025. As in the preceding ordinance, it is a third reading and will require no suspension of the rules. We'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Sanders, and I will ask Ms. DiPaolo to please read the title.
Ordinance number 2018-025, an ordinance amending Chapter 521, Health, Safety, and Sanitation of the codified ordinances of the city of Worcester, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, again, I guess this legislation had somewhat of a slow start. We really didn't have a whole lot of conversation regarding this legislation in its first reading, its second reading, and now its third reading. We seem to have a full house, which is good. And I hear I hear the words from all the people. I think ironically, though, no one's called me in the 6 weeks that this legislation's been out. I've not had one phone call or well, I've been emailed by a couple different people, but they weren't directed to me. They were sent out to other council members, and they were forwarded to me. But I know this isn't, this piece of legislation isn't one that right now is gleaning a lot of support. But for me, the problem I have is we do have people, we do have a societal norm. We've been lectured by the fact that, everyone has an opportunity, they have the rights, they have the ability to do whatever they want. And I would argue that everyone has a right to do what they want until they infringe on someone else's rights. And while I'm not convinced that this legislation is going to be the best thing that's been written, but the good thing about any law is that if it's passed, it can be changed, it can be modified, or it can be rescinded at some future time. So with that, I'll open the floor for any conversation.
Well, I would ask you to make a motion.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sanders. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Now you can open the floor for comment, discussion. Mr. Silvestri?
Thank you, Mr. Sanders, for that introduction. I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. I want to thank you for your interest in local government and what we do here in these chambers. This has been a difficult issue for me because we all see the goal, we all see what needs to be accomplished, and I want to turn your attention to the 3 whereas sections in this ordinance, because a lot of what was said tonight is irrelevant to what this legislation is aimed at. It says, whereas the City of Worcester desires to promote the health and safety of those who could benefit from the use of the shelter facilities available in the City of Worcester, and whereas individuals without shelter will be safer in their persons and property if they make use of the available shelter facilities in the City of Worcester, whereas there is a need to continuously maintain communication with those who would benefit from shelter resources in the City of Worcester. And those 3 statements, those 3 sentences are the premises on which this ordinance is based. Now, I've heard all that's been said tonight and last meeting. I've heard about people saying that money never went to those who needed it most, and I would challenge that. We have organizations represented here tonight. There are organizations such as the Salvation Army, Community Action, Wayne Medina, People to People Ministries. I know they regularly give out financial assistance. We've talked about people that want to succeed, that need to succeed, and don't have the resources to succeed. We've talked about a lack of fixed, regular nighttime residence, which is contained in the definition that was given for homelessness. We've talked about low-wage earning families. We've talked about children. We've talked about not targeting those who are less fortunate. This is not about rich and poor. It's not about those that are just less fortunate. It's about those who have been offered help and who are qualified to spend the night in a shelter, refusing to go there. I want to draw your attention to section 509.02 of our codified ordinances. It says, it's our curfew section. It says, no child under the age of 14 years shall be on the streets or other public places in the city between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. except on Friday and Saturday, when the hours shall be 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and no child between the ages of 14 and 18 years shall be on the streets or other public places in the city between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., except on Friday and Saturday, when the hours shall be 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. We have a law for our youth to find shelter at night. And this piece of legislation tonight is for those who are entitled and qualified to find shelter in a shelter, to spend the night there and not on our streets. It's about safety, as I read in those whereas sections. It's about persons and property being safest in a shelter. That's why we have what we know as civilization. And I am all for continuing to further our quest in making these resources more available to those in need. What I am against is people refusing the resources that we have worked hard to put into place in our county and in our city. So for those reasons, and I want to make it clear what this piece of legislation is aimed at, I'm all for being compassionate. I'm all for being constitutional. I want to commend our law director, Mr. Scavelli, for his year-long work on this piece of legislation. And I'm not about to abandon these efforts just because this is misunderstood. I think it's a good place to start. As Mr. Sanders said, it's not the end. This is just the beginning. But I think we can set the tone, we can set the direction, we can reach the goal, but this is a great place to start. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Myers?
Thank you. I agree that things need to be done. I thank everybody who came this evening to speak, and I would want to thank all of them, but I want to specifically mention that Mr. Chupp, Mr. Gooch, and Mr. Thompson, I think they have the right idea. I think before we would initiate some sort of legislation like this that could potentially fine and jail our poverty-stricken folks in our community, we've not put any money or funds additional beyond what's already being done in our community towards helping them. I know that there's a task force. I went to one or two of those meetings. I would suggest that the first step might be a public-private partnership to help fund the nonprofit agencies in our community. They're all doing everything they can. It comes down to money, and I think we need to provide a continuous, ongoing outreach to those in our community who are economically challenged, help those that are willing to take help, and do that first. And then if need be, additional steps may need to be taken. But if we've been looking at this and talking about this for quite some time, it would seem that we could put some of the funds together to help those agencies that are professional to do that in our community first. Thank you.
Ms. Warren?
Thank you. I'd like to echo what Councilman Myers said, and I also thank everybody for coming tonight. I think it shows that we are a compassionate community, and I'm glad to represent people of our community who are like that. I believe it was Mr. Chupp who suggested close collaboration and regular reporting from the task force. I would love to see that as well. I know that all of us on this council have multiple activities that we're involved in, including full-time jobs in addition to this. So being active on the task force might not be an option for all of us. It'd be wonderful if we could have reports occasionally from that group to kind of keep us on track and to keep us focused on our goal. I'd also like to just encourage people to come to us with suggestions as opposed to making accusations about bringing people to our town to cause more problems or threatening us or spewing conspiracy theories about how we squander tax dollars. I don't think that's positive. I don't think it's productive, and it's no way to achieve results. So I would just like to remind everyone of that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll just weigh in briefly. I made my comments the last meeting. It's unfortunate because the intent of this ordinance was to help people that wanted help, that might not be aware of a facility or a support service function and would provide them assistance. And it's been misinterpreted, and that's unfortunate because there are people who don't want help. And you can't force help on people if they don't want it. That's my challenge with this initiative, because if someone really does want help, this would provide them that assistance to secure short-term, perhaps longer-term assistance. They don't want it. They don't want it. So this would then force an arrest, a penalty, create more turmoil, dissension, angst, and because the person doesn't want it. So if they don't want it, we don't want to get the ACLU involved. You don't want to force somebody not doing something they don't want to do it, because that violates their rights. This is a no-win. The intent was 100% honest and forthright, trying to assist those who want assistance. This isn't about those. It's about the people that really don't want to prescribe to the normalcy of assistance or routines or checks and balances. And those are issues we have to deal with. But then to try to execute and penalize those individuals is an exercise in futility that I'm not willing to. I support you, Mr. Silvestri, in intent, and Mr. Sanders, but I'm also a realist. And this is something that is going to be very, very difficult to enforce, because if someone doesn't want help, you don't have to take it. And you shouldn't be fined if you don't want to take someone's help. And that's what this does. So it's unfortunate. Thank you, City Administration. I appreciate your creativity and your intent. But I think it's a can of worms that is going to be a formidable challenge and litigation opportunity in the future, and the exposure just isn't worth the situation of trying to help someone that doesn't want help. Thank you. That's all I have.
I'd like to say I agree with much of what you have to say, Mr. Ansel. Many years ago, almost more than I can remember, back in the late 70s, one of my first jobs after I got out of grad school, I was a drug and alcohol counselor for 6.5 years. So I do have a little bit of knowledge with regard to some of the social issues. Lately, for about 10 years, I've been on the board of directors of the Oasis Club. And, you know, hold it against me, I'm also an attorney, so I am concerned about civil rights and constitutional rights. I do have a great admiration for Mr. Scavelli's legal acumen, and I know that the administration has worked very hard to try to craft something that's going to satisfy business owners, and I understand their concerns, and at the same time, trying to get some people help. But the issue of homelessness and the problems that some of the people have are not easily solved with some of the things even suggested tonight. We've already have a problem with overcrowding in the jail. I don't see how this is going to solve that. Our officers are strained at times with having to testify in court for more serious matters. I don't see how this is going to help that. I know that the administration feels compelled and pressured to address the concerns of the business owners, but I don't think this is going to help that either. So coming from all the various hats that I have worn over the years, as much as I wish there was a magic wand to solve the problem, I don't think this is a magic wand. In fact, I think it will create more chaos in an already chaotic situation, especially in the personal lives of the individuals it will impact most. Well, that was a crowd killer. So seeing no one else has anything else to say, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
No.
Ansel?
No.
Bastancik?
No.
Myers?
No.
Sanders?
Yes.
Did I count 4 noes? Okay, ordinance number 2018-025 does not pass. Don't make me use the gavel. I've only used it once in 7 years, okay? That brings us to ordinance number 2018-026, presented by Mr. Ansel. This is only on second reading, Mr. Ansel, so depending on what you want to do, it would, if you want to call a vote, you would have to have the rules suspended. But
Understood. Thank you.
before I give you that option, I will have Ms. DiPaolo read the, hopefully, last piece of legislation for calendar year 2018. Take it away, Ms. DiPaolo.
Ordinance number 2018-026, an ordinance revising the authorized range of pay scales and benefits for hourly rated and salaried employees at Worcester Community Hospital and repealing former ordinances.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, and I did see Mr. Boyce sneak in here.
Yes, I see Mr. Boyes
Oh,
over there.
he's hiding behind Mr. Bostancic. You provide a good screen. There he is. All right, so Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would like to get this resolved this evening because we're talking about the wage adjustments going into effect in the 1st of January for the hospital. But as we had discussed at our last working session, this is part of the Ohio Healthcare Association annual comp review and wage survey, and it fits within all of the criteria of that survey. Mr. Myers had some detailed questions. I really appreciate his questions from our last working session. I copied counsel on Marlon Taylor's response to Mr. Myers' questions, and hopefully they were self-explanatory. He wrote a 2-page summary in detail responding to Mr. Myers. And again, Mr. Myers, I compliment you. Those were very good questions. And the answers, in my mind, responded to the questions, and I'm very, very comfortable with the objectivity, the thoroughness, the comprehensiveness of the recommended merit increase across the board for the Worcester Community Hospital. So, yeah, with that, The 2% falls within, the median range, and I think we can all agree that a 2% annually is a reasonable increase range for a cost of living adjustment, if you will. So I'm prepared to suspend the rules of council and move ordinance 2018-26 to third and final reading this evening.
I'll take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Bastancik?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
And Sanders.
Yes.
Rules are suspended. I look to you.
Motion to
again.
adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Myers. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I just want to thank Marlon Taylor from the Worcester Community Hospital. I don't believe he's here this evening, but he gave an incredibly detailed response into some fairly direct questions I asked him with regard to staffing and compensation levels for our community hospital. I did make it clear in my questions to him that I am very proud of our hospital and the work that the staff and everyone does up there. My questions were merely on wage comparisons and things like that. He did a great job. I do point out, and for future, and since Mr. Boyes is here, and I can do this, later too, but it does state that as the board, as a general philosophy, applies the increases across the board. But one of the things that a couple board members had shared with me, and Mr. Boyes as well, some of the categories of positions at our hospital are difficult to find staffing for. Some of the entry-level positions, my only thought is I would be willing to consider, let's maybe not do it across the board, but if you needed help with certain areas, maybe we should look at certain job classifications for better increases in order to be able to better compete with other hospitals to get the people you need.
Good thought.
Anyone else? I would just say the proof is in the pudding. We've gotten accolades from a number of different groups that have said for a hospital owned by a community, which is one of the last, if not the last, in the state of Ohio. The services provided are expansive and measure up well against bigger cities. Patient response is always high. And the people that work there, when I've been there to visit, folks are friendly, helpful. Our hospital does a great job, and I don't think 2% is too much to ask to continue the wonderful community hospital services that everyone gets when they enter the door. And I know Mr. Boyes crunches the numbers, and if he feels comfortable that this will make us continue to be competitive with some of the 500-pound gorillas in the hospital profession, then I would recommend that we take Mr. Ansel's lead and adopt this measure. Anything else? Seeing none, would you call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Bastancik?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2018-026 passes. There is no new business. As I alluded, this was our last piece of legislation for 2018. And Ms. Moser, I thought my speech was okay, but I didn't think it needed the musical costume there. Yeah, thanks. So that'll bring us to the miscellaneous portion, and I think we'll start with the ward councils and just move across the board there. So we'll start with Ms. Warden.
Thank you, President Beitendijk. I just, again, want to reiterate my appreciation for everyone that showed up tonight. And another thing that I kind of was thinking about, everyone's encouraging the city to provide more low-income housing. I'd also like to pass that encouragement on to property owners in the community. The city does not own a large quantity or essentially any housing that we can lower the cost of for people. So, I mean, we have programs in place that we can assist people with, but the housing has to exist. So I encourage developers and property owners to make more affordable housing available to people. And kind of to tie in with the ordinance that was just passed, or maybe it was a resolution, but for the hospital pay increase, I think it would be great if our local employers would take note of that. And you know, that's a citywide thing that also happens with the employees of the city of Worcester. But regular pay increases are another way to lift people up out of poverty, and that's not something that we see, especially at a lot of the lower level or lower paying jobs in our community. So I'd really like to encourage people to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warden. Mr. Silvestri.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, for your input, for your concern, for your comments. They were all heard, and I'm looking forward to the new direction. And we all agree up here on at least our quest for the solution, and that's why we can establish policy, and that's why we can make decisions, is because some of us see it differently, but the goals are the same, and we have the public's interest at heart, and I look forward to the solutions that'll be forthcoming. Thanks.
Mr. Myers?
Thank you, President Beitendijk. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for everybody who came tonight and those who spoke. We do this like twice a month, so feel free to come back. We did not always have heart-tugging issues quite like this, but I would really encourage everyone to participate in their government by sharing their thoughts about what they'd like to see our city do. I want to especially thank the Boy Scouts for coming this evening. Appreciate you guys coming. I did notice, I think everybody who spoke made some very good points, and I do appreciate them. I don't mean to single somebody out, but I'm going to say I thought that Alexander Thompson was particularly articulate, and thank you for coming this evening. I'm not sure if you had any part in the article in the back of the Blade that was most recently published as well, but it was along the same
He's
fonts.
big man on campus at Tufts.
Oh, that's right. He's not there anymore. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming. I appreciate it. So, and thanks everybody for this evening. Merry Christmas.
Mr. Ansel?
Yes, great participation this evening. Well, the last two meetings, controversy and dynamics generate, public interest, and it really is a cool process, and it's reassuring, and it's the essence of our democracy, and it's nice to hear different perspectives and interpretations, but we're all working together, and that's what you have to embrace and have the confidence that we have everyone's best interest in mind, and we're trying to accomplish mutual goals. Don't ever think there's resistance in terms of some of the idealism and spiritual things that we all want to accomplish, but that is, the essence of our democracy. So again, thank you for your participation and echoing your thoughts and concerns and perspectives. And 2018 was a remarkable year as a city. We should all be very proud of our accomplishments, as well as the citizens. It was a formidable and a remarkable year. And the reassuring thing is we have strong momentum going into 2019. It's all about momentum and forward progress, and strong momentum as we enter 2019. Other than that, have a safe and happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. President. I too wish to thank everyone for coming this evening, coming last 2 weeks ago. We do hear you. We may not all agree, but we hear you. And just to echo what everyone else said up here earlier, and Merry Christmas.
And Mr. Bostancic, we'll give you the last word from the members of council here.
Like everyone, I really appreciate the public coming out. We are, as Mr. Myers said here, every first and third Monday of the month. What I hope we can all take from this discussion of the homeless situation is we really can't stop here. We really do need to have some concrete action, or at least try to find some solutions with the various organizations that are out there. If that means public-private partnerships, I think we'll look into that, and I can see for the right sort of plans, the city might want to contribute. to some extent, depending on what it is and the amount needed. But I think we just need to go forward from here, and hopefully we can have input from the organizations out there and let us know what we can do as a city. If it's money or legislation or whatever. As a councilman, I'd be very interested in hearing that, and I hope we all do, because I just don't want to see this problem this discussion just go away. We just have to go forward from here and keep the momentum of hope. Even though this legislation not passed, some would say it was no momentum achieved, but I think with everybody here and all the opinions that were expressed, I think that was a positive thing, and hopefully we'll get some momentum out of that. So that's it. Thank you.
And I want to say, once again, I have enjoyed working with each and every one of you on this council. It just seems yesterday we had 2 new members, Ms. Ward and Mr. Bostancic, but a year has gone by already, and I can't believe it.
Flew by.
Hopefully this council going into 2019 embodies what you saw here in terms that we can have open and frank discussion. We don't always agree, but up to this point, even when that happens, there isn't a single one, I don't think, has ever held it against us. And we, as it was stated, we all work to try to go in the same direction. And, opinions differ, but it seems to me that after it's said and done, we go on to the next task without any grudges. And I appreciate, people don't understand the hard work all of you've put in. I'd like to give a particular shout out to the Finance Committee, which this last part of the year, they work hard and dig in. And individual council members also analyze the numbers, particularly Mr. Silvestri and Mr. Myers. So people do work hard. None of us have an axe to grind with the citizens as maybe was characterized at times by some people here recently. They are all just doing their best to make Worcester a wonderful place to live. And so far, I think the administration and council working together have done a pretty good job. Obviously, people like coming here, and I don't see many people moving away. So thank you, council. And to everyone, I wish you joyous holidays, whatever you celebrate. And I hope that 2019 will be a successful and happy year for you all. So thank you, council, for allowing me to preside over one more year here.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Warren, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.